welcome. I guess more people will join while we are talking because we had many registrations for this webinar. It seems to be a very hot topic, very interesting for most of you. So we will not lose time. Very shortly, I would like to present the facilitators of today. So is Christophe Duquesne. Christophe, please say hello and also actually introduce yourself.
Hello, so I'm Christophe Duquesne from France, and I'm working with CEN for quite a long time on everything about the transmodal, and I'm the leader of the NeTEx group, and so and therefore was also leading the work on the new modes. So that will be the topic for today.
Thank you, Christophe. And then we have Cassia Bourret. Cassia, please. We cannot hear you. Okay, we didn't test it before. Please try to check the settings. Meanwhile, I will let Nick to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Nick Knowles. I'm Nick Knowles from the UK, and I've worked in the NeTEx and Transmodal working groups for a number of years, and have worked on the new modes project too.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And for myself, I'm Anastasia Fuda. I work for Data4PT together with the IT4PT team. We lead the technical activities of this project. Cassia, can you try again, please? No. Can you try to reconnect, probably? Yes, okay. See you in a bit. So for your information, the agenda is seen is showed here. We will have the first part. The first part will be something like an introduction. So we will set the scene, what was the background, how this NeTEx Part 5 regarding alternative modes was built, and also we will refer to the trans model, which is the background conceptual model. And we will also present the functional scope, which is covered by Part 5. And then we will have, I guess, enough time to enter into the use cases and also to get your questions and answers. The idea is to write your question on the chat. And then at the end, we will address all the questions together. And if we don't have time, you will receive an answer after the webinar as well. So just a reminder, what is about Data4PT. The project is the official way to support member states and all the stakeholders to comply with MMTIS delegated regulation. And it's a CEF program support action funded by CEF, and the project officer is DG Move. And there are 9 member states that they participate actively, but we have also many follower member states that also contribute to the activities. You may find more information in the website and in the wiki page that we maintain. And there is also another webinar in 2 weeks regarding NeTEx validation tool. And you most likely received an email regarding the stakeholders forum that it will happen next week in Brussels. So I will quickly give the floor to Cassia, hoping that he's back and
can you hear me?
can. Yes, great.
Yes. Okay. So I will shortly present you the background of all this work. Next slide, please.
Please introduce also yourself because we missed this part.
Yeah, okay. So I am Kasia Bourret. I'm from France. I am working for many, many years in standardization of data for transport, for public transport. I was the initiator of the idea to define a standard for data, public transport data structures, and it became the Transmodal, so the public transport reference data model. So I'm leading that group at CEN, and I'm an expert in the DATA4PT project. I will shortly, very briefly introduce the background of our work. You all know the regulatory context, I hope so. At least you are very probably, you know the delegated regulation MMTIS, which not only concerns the conventional public transport, but also the so-called demand responsive modes, which we call either new modes or alternative modes. And what is requested is to consider to publish on the national access points park and ride stops, bike sharing station, car sharing station, publicly accessible refueling station, and also information about where and how to buy tickets for demand responsive modes. Next slide, please. So the context in which we started the development was a team within CEN, TC278. It was in the working group 17, which is called Mobility Integration. It started in 2016 and the result was the publication of data structures for the so-called alternative modes in this group, and this was passed over to another group, which is working group 3, public transport. Public transport, that group is composed of several subgroups, and the yellow ones are in a way belonging together. They are all based on the reference data model for public transport, Transmodal, and which is in the subgroup 4, developed, enhanced in subgroup 4. And the other subgroups are working on the implementation of that model. So SIRI is the subgroup 7 and NeTEx in the subgroup 9, for instance. Next slide, please. So just to show you that many people have contributed to this development. So as said, it started in SG4 in the Transmodal subgroup, and it ended, let's say like this, in the NeTEx working group SG9. We have been structured in project teams with few very active members, but a lot of contributors, and a lot of liaisons have been created with stakeholders, so with those who are really working with these modes, but also with administrations, associations, ministries, authorities, and also with sister groups, CEN groups, like DATEX or other groups like this. So this is a picture that shows you a colored picture of all these who have been in a way involved, contacted, informed during the last 5 years. Next slide. How it was developed? Well, we didn't start from scratch. Transmodal has been developed for years. It is structured. These bubbles show you the different parts. Part 1 until part 8 and 9 exist for many years already. And the idea was, can you click please? Twice. To incorporate the alternative modes within the already existing environment, data environment, so that we can connect, for instance, when we show a trip, an intermodal trip, you will see an example afterwards, that we can coherently represent a trip carried out with conventional, but also with the public transport, but also with the alternative modes. Next. Our way of working is always the same. I mean, the process or the principles, we start with the conceptual model, which is implementation independent, and which, as said, it is transmodal. It's modeled as a UML, with UML methodology. And it goes to the physical level. And this is then represented. This work is then done by NeTEx. Maybe you click then, please, twice or 3 times. You see that from the conceptual part we go to the parts of implementation, NeTEx, and it is in part 5 of NeTEx, and in SIRI for as regards the real-time data. These data are then related to SIRI. So maybe my colleague will continue. Nick. So you are muted.
You are muted. You are muted, Nick.
Thanks. So transmodal gives us a joined up conceptual model of all the components we need to describe different forms of transport, both in old modes and new modes. But it's important to remember that when we come to implement transmodal with actual concrete protocols and data exchange formats, that really these are used in 2 very different ways. So there are the dynamic APIs that would typically be supporting an app where a user is making a query and getting a response back. And then in order for those apps to work, they're typically running on engines that have large databases, and that data isn't exchanged usually in this real time. It's used to provision the databases before the engines are started up, and to typically do quite a lot of complex pre-processing to integrate the data. So what we will need in practice is we're talking about 2 different types of API. The dynamic APIs, which are typically going to be the ones that car sharing or carpooling or bike sharing applications use, as there are also facilities in SIRI, the SEN API for transport data, and then the other sort is for bulk exchange. So if you look at the next slide, we'll just sort of show this conceptually. So we've got transmodal. The top gives us a conceptual model that covers all the different aspects. We've got bulk exchange standards on the left, of which the sort of primary SEN standard is NeTEx. But it's also, you may also be exchange data for all sorts of reasons, with GTFS, with OSDM for railway, or in TAP TSI. In the middle, you've got real-time data exchange. So as done with SIRI, and you've also got APIs on the right for journey planning. So SIRI is typically doing things like stop departures and availability of facilities. OJP is doing journey planners. So we're really talking about two quite different types of formats. So bulk exchange, you're typically large amounts of data, and so that in a way that can be integrated and put into an engine. SIRI, you're typically optimizing for efficient real-time data. And in the context of the new modes, we're very much expecting a world where you may have a number of different real-time services that want to be able to integrate their data and be integrated as far as, you might do the journey plan for the overall steps of the journey. And then once you've decided you want to use cycling for a particular, or a car ride sharing or taxi or some specific service, then you can call that API to do the specific details of that API. So this is all about joining stuff up. Okay. And I think that's, if you want to hand back to Kasia. Christophe, sorry.
Or to Christophe, yeah.
So we will now go a little more in the details of the scope and the functional side of NeTEx Part 5. So as just explained by Nick, this Part 5 of NeTEx is really based on Transmodal, so implementing an exchange protocol on the model which is provided by Transmodal. And NeTEx, for everything and for a new mod, is focusing on planned data, so everything that is known in advance. So versus real time, as explained by Nick, that you will find in SIRI. Just to avoid any misunderstanding, when we say planned data, it may change within a day. You may have some fares, some prices that are changing every hours, but if it's known in advance, that's still planned. So when we say real time, that's really a change against the plan. If the plan is not followed properly, then you have some additional real time. But everything that is in any way known in advance is in the scope of NeTEx. Next slide, please. Yes, so NeTEx is covering all the modes that are inside Transmodal. So you have all the legacy public transport, the bus, trains, so long distance, local, urban, and everything. That's for a long time in it. It also, this for a long time, has all flexible on-demand transport, so hail and ride, virtual lines, everything like this is for a long time in NeTEx and Transmodal. And the Part 5 has had it, all the, you can stay on the previous one, everything about new or alternative modes. So vehicle sharing, so we say vehicle, but since that any kind of vehicle, so you can share bike, you can share cars. Vehicle pooling, so a driver is offering some rides, so also sometimes called ride sharing, but we call it vehicle pooling in NeTEx and Transmodal. Vehicle rentals, so rental of vehicles, transport network companies and taxis, so Ubers and so chauffeured cars and so on, are also covered. Still, this about planned information. So we can go to next slide. So the first functional scope here presented is vehicle sharing. So when you have a set of vehicles that you can take for sometime and use it for just a specific trips between two stations. That's vehicle, so that could be scooters, that could be bikes, that could be cars. You have a set of vehicles which are grouped in some fleet. Of course, a fleet can have different types of vehicles with different performances and different possibilities. In NeTEx, you will also have the details of all the stations, or the stations themselves, how many vehicles can be inside, the details of all the base places where the vehicle can go, but also, and that's very important, the integration with other modes. So a bike station, for example, can be inside the parking, or can be inside a train station, or can be just connected just next to a bus stop, or it can be somewhere else, but also having the connections described with every other public transport or every other alternative mode. So that's one important point for NeTEx here, is to give a global view of mobility. It's not just that alternative mode by itself, it's an alternative mode integrated in the full mobility offer. You will find a vehicle access device, so how to unlock your bike, for example, when you go and take your bike, and of course also the description of the online service or application you need to use your bike or to book it. NeTEx will also provide the vehicle sharing operator description, so who is operating the service and how to contact them, and all the details about the company, and also some additional information, like you may have some geofencing, so some geographic limitation where you can use a vehicle, or on places where areas where you can't use you can't go. So that will be also defined in NeTEx as planned information. The booking information, where to go to book a vehicle, when you can book it, all the conditions you will have, can you cancel, or can't you, and everything. The fare offer, so if the price is defined in advance, which is most often the case here for vehicle sharing, the price information and the pricing, and also all the conditions and the rights you will get from that fare will be described, and of course the user account description when you do need a user account. Next slide, please. So another functional scope is taxi and transport network companies, so chauffeured cars, and companies like Uber will be described here. So still, that's about planned information, so where you will find the description of vehicles, all the pickup and drop-off place. So it can be a fixed one, a predefined one, but it can be also one single-use one. So something you're going to use only once to go from one point to the others. Of course, the company, so the TNC and the taxi company will be described as every other company. So with the contact information, all the legal informations, and everything you need to know about the company operating the service. When there is an online service or an application, it will be described as previously. The booking information, of course, are described. So where to go to book, the phone number, the app, the website, or whatever, and the conditions, the fare offer, and user account. So as you can see, we already have here a few common functional points, even between taxis and shared vehicle sharing. So, and here we are using that to avoid duplicating definitions. Whenever we have something which is in common between two functional areas in NeTEx, we reuse the definitions. Next slide, please. So vehicle rentals, the same thing. We will always find the vehicle descriptions. Once again, here we say vehicle, so the picture is a car, but this can be a scooter, this can be a bike, or whatever new vehicle will come in the future. If some new vehicle are coming, you will have parking description with possibly a specific area in the parking where you have the vehicle rental. The vehicle rental company description, same online service and apps, booking information, fare offer, and user account. So all this is kind of shared with other functional scope, but with a specific view on rental. Yeah, next slide, please. Vehicle pooling, so that's when a driver is offering a ride from one point to the other, and maybe shorten or having a reroute to pick up or drop off a passenger. Same thing, that can be a motorbike or a car or any kind of vehicle. So here we have a few additional concepts that needs to be described, which are the drivers and traveler profiles. Which will be useful with all the information, the ranking, and the possible limitation. Will they accept animals, pets, and so on? You will get the vehicle pooling offer. So when there's an offer in advance of a specific ride from one point to the other, NeTEx will provide a way to exchange that planned offer. When there are carpooling areas and connection points with other modes, that will be described. But that's an important point, because the good high-end phases on carpooling areas these days. So that's obviously something you can describe, but also any kind of pickup or drop-off place that even could be. That there could be obviously carpooling areas, but that could be outside or kind of freely defined pickup drop-off places. That could be inside the parking or all the other ones of the vehicle pulling places. That's also something specific. In the parking, you may have some places dedicated to drivers driving a car for vehicle pulling, so with some specific conditions. So that's something you can define in NeTEx, and then the app, the booking, the fare offer, and the user account as for other alternative modes. One thing also we do have in NeTEx, and that was enhanced for alternative modes, are the refueling and recharging devices. So you may find this in other standards like DATEX. There are also some dedicated standards for like OCPI for roaming of the service. But here the main point is we are describing in NeTEx this in also still in the full mobility point of view. So that's for any kind of vehicle. So to charge your bike, to charge your scooter, or of course to be able to charge your car, you will get the location of this charging device, the charging station characteristic, but also the battery characteristic inside the vehicle. So of course the battery in the vehicle, the characteristic of the battery in the vehicle must be consistent with the charging station characteristic. One thing I didn't mention, you also can describe this for buses. So when you have some electric buses with some specificities, that's something you can describe, and you won't find this in other standards. And so for all modes, that's really the key point. Maybe not as detailed as OCPI can do, but you have the information that you can find here, the characteristics of battery, charging point, and location, and then the online service and apps which are related to charge your and pay your charging. So booking information, fare offer, and user account as for all other alternative modes. This was for the scheduled information, but obviously for alternative modes, you do need real-time information. So as explained before by Nick, the real-time information is not covered by NeTEx, but is covered by SIRI. But of course, everything is consistent. You can flawlessly go from one to the other. And SIRI does have services providing you the main information you need about alternative modes, which are the availability of vehicles. So to know when you go to stations, what are the available vehicles, to have the availability of parking places. So if you want to bring back a vehicle to a station, that's still a vehicle that will work for a car, for a scooter, for bike, on any kind of vehicle. You also can get from SIRI the vehicle position, and that will work typically and it's very useful typically for free floating services, but that will work also for taxi or rental vehicle. And one thing also which is important is that you have the status of everything, every equipment or every vehicle or every place. So vehicle typically here, places and vehicles have their unknown status. So you may have a bike that is available at a bike sharing station, but the bike is broken for a flat tire or whatever. And then that's something you can mention. So there's a bike here, but you won't be able to use it because something is wrong with the vehicle. So you will have everything about the vehicle, the spaces, and the status of all this, and when they are available and where they're located. So that will be provided by SIRI services in real time. There are a lot of key concepts, just two of them which are important here and that we are managing from Transmodal and to NeTEx, inside NeTEx, of course. The fact that you have a mode of transport, which is a vehicle mode. It's really describing the type of vehicle you're using, but you also have a mode of operation, and a single type of vehicle can be used with different type of modes of operation. Typically, a car, you can use it for taxi, you can use it for vehicle sharing, you can use it for carpooling. So the same mode, the same vehicle mode can be used with different modes of operation. So that's what we have in Transmodal and NeTEx. And that's an important concept because you can have the exact same vehicle description, but then different kind of mode of operation. That allows us to share everything about the vehicle and just specialize the mode of operation. And one thing I want to emphasize once more is that everything is viewed within a global mobility view. So that's not just a view on rental, just a view or on shared mobility or whatever. That's really a view on the global mobility and on the possible connections you can have across them. And of course, we have added for this, one important addition was to add the services, and a lot of alternative modes do need an online service to book or to where you will have your user account, and that will be also, that's an important addition of NeTEx in this part 5. So that's pretty helpful for this functional, and that I guess Nika and Cassia will go on examples.
Okay, thank you. Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
fine.
Yeah, okay. So we thought that it would be useful to show some examples how these data structures and data formats may be used. One of and also the links with the other parts of Transmodal and NeTEx. Here a rather complex example of the trip planning, of the trip plan, and here an example of a trip option. First of all, Transmodal and NeTEx provide the different components of a trip option. How it defines in fact the different pieces of a trip, different parts. First, the access leg to first to at the start of the trip to reach the transport. Then different legs, different types of legs, and different types of locations where you can reach the transport, and different other parameters related to these different components of a trip option, as for instance accessibility features, which I will not detail here. But what NeTEx provides is the data format for this particular trip option when a traveler wants to go from A to B, and a journey planner provides the following: an access leg from A to C, so to the first car sharing station. He picks up a car and travels with a shared car to the location D, which may be a car sharing station also. And this car sharing station is in the neighborhood of a train station. because he has his recommendation was, I want to travel using car sharing, but also by train. So the journey planner has provided the location S, this train station in the neighborhood of this car sharing station, and he travels on one train to the station, to the end station P, where he gets out and he then reaches, for instance, by walking, his end location and destination B. NeTEx provides the data format for access legs, for the different legs, so alternative mode legs, also for the leg, which is the connection leg, the yellow part, and also, of course, the leg that is carried out with the rail, by rail. So these are the different parts of the trip. Previously, you have heard also that NeTEx provides also the car sharing stations, the format for these, and also you can get the availability within a given zone of such car sharing stations. So the availability here would be the existence of car sharing station, in the sense that a car sharing station exists. You can also get the location address, for instance, of the car sharing stations. When you access a car sharing station, you need the information how to unlock my vehicle. So once you have purchased, you have your access right, then you get also the access credentials of the vehicle access code, for instance. And before your trip, you also get the information about the booking arrangements. Christoph has already mentioned that for several types of these modes of operations where booking is necessary, NeTEx does not provide an API for the booking process itself, but provides information on the specific parameters for the booking rules. For instance, how to make a booking by phone, calling a driver, or online, providing the URL of the website for the online booking. Who can make a booking? Anyone, specific members or so, whether cancellation is possible, whether a deposit is required as a guarantee, when make a booking, for instance, on the day of travel only, or how many days before, how long does this booking, will the booking last, and so on. Can you show the previous slide? So here, this is the booking arrangements. Also, and in brackets, you see that what is provided is the estimated price of the trip. Estimated because we are talking about planned prices, either of the prices of the alternative mode legs and conventional mode legs, or combined prices, for instance, train plus an alternative mode, which may be planned as very specific price, with very specific price features. when you use them together. You also have information where and how to pay. And here, as regards the price, you see the relationship with NeTEx Part 3, which gives you information about the pricing and the access rights, the different access rights types. Also, the relationship with NeTEx Part 2, because you see that what is needed in this case are the departure times at station S. So from a specific time point when the traveler has requires the trip. There is of course the link with the real-time, the dynamic data. So the real-time availability of vehicles and the availability of parking slots. This is required when you pick up your shared car and you want to know whether at the point C and whether you have a free slot, parking slot at the point D. And so for that reason, we have a big model and a big coherent, let's say, ecosystem to be able and to have all this information which is related, represented in a coherent way. And I think you will see other use cases. I don't know who will present that. Nick?
Just a moment, I will reshare the screen because I think it was a bit blocked. I don't know, what do you see now?
Editor mode.
We see it, I see it.
Okay.
Now it's a slideshow.
Okay, great. So please, Nick, unmute yourself, just unmute yourself. And
Thanks, Kasia. So Kasia has shown that what this is all about is making the alternative modes visible to journey planners so that you can do joined up journey planning. And that entails both making information about the alternative modes visible in a uniform, coherent format that engines can easily pick up and make use of, and also the other way, making the public transport access points available to the alternative modes, so they can provide the user useful information about, you know, where to the public transport and other mode access points are. So it's intended to allow for a sort of two-way flow of data. Now I'm going to just pick up a couple of the Kasia showed you a whole sequence of legs, both alternative modes and conventional transport. I'm going to pick up on a couple of the alternative mode legs just to try and give you a sense of what the components are and how you build up a system. So the first one I'm going to take is a bike sharing example, and essentially we have components to describe that the service exists and who runs it and when it operates, and what type of vehicles and how many vehicles it has, and all the booking information for them that Kasia has just been describing. The second important point is where is it available exactly, which we describe by using a zones. So we can have zones that with the stations and how many bicycles are available at the stations. So for the static numbers are in NeTEx, and you can do a dynamic API to say current availability using SIRI or your own app. Or if it's a floating bike, you can just have where the bike is currently located in in real time. Constraint zones can also include places that you're not allowed to go. So there might be pedestrian areas that you're not allowed to take a bike into, or the concept, if you were using, and these same concepts are also relevant for other types of service. So, for example, if you have a car rental service where you're not allowed to cross an international border, you could use constraint zones to express that. Another key aspect of describing the service to the point that someone can consider it as a journey planning option and compare it with their other options like a bus or train or whatever, is to have the fare, be able to describe the fare structure. As Kasia was saying, we have in NeTEx and Transmodal, we have a general set of fare components for building up fares. So you start off by saying, well, what's the fare structure? Am I charging per minute, or am I charging for a single ride per minute, or am I charging, I'm giving you a zonal pass for 1 hour, 1 day, or a season ticket. So you have a set of components that you can build up a fare, and those components are equally the same sort of thing that you might use for describing a public transport journey can be used to describe a bike sharing fare, or even a taxi fare just as well. I mean, if you look at taxi fares, typically you've either got a per minute charge, or you've got possibly some fixed fares, which are like point-to-point fares for going to an airport from the center of town or going to certain well-known points. So the same fares, essentially the same uniform system for describing fares, and then building products on top can be used, but both for describing conventional fares and for describing the alternative mode fares. And that's particularly useful because, of course, it's quite common to want to provide a multimodal fare offering. So, for example, you might have a city card that allows you to travel on the tram and the metro, and to make a certain number of trips on a cycle share or scooter share system, or even unlimited fares. So you can build bundled fares that combine the different modes into a uniform option made up of different components. And you can also cover quite often with schemes, you're going to register that or have some sort of pass, so you can describe the user's contact details and then relate stuff like access codes for using a particular vehicle as part of the system. So as we were saying back at the beginning, we've got a set of data that's typically fairly static that you'd exchange with NeTEx, and then some real-time data like the current availability of vehicles, so how many vehicles are in a given station, or how many available slots are on a station that you'd use an API for. If we go to the next slide,
Did you see it?
No, I'm still seeing the last slide. Yeah, there we go. It's come up.
Okay.
So this is all about really being able to integrate alternative modes of journey planning into multimodal journey planning and making the services visible. And so that means that sort of the real use cases this is about is making the necessary information for someone who's planning a trip or considering going somewhere. So first of all, is a cycle or other cycle sharing service available in the area at all? If there is, then how do I use it? So is there an app I go to, or an online booking system I need to download, or and also I would like to know the relative costs so that I can compare it with my other modes. So that's kind of the NeTEx bit allows you to make that information available to a journey planner. When you're actually using a trip, you're probably going to be using the dynamic API provided by the bike sharing service. That's fine. Or you could be building a bike sharing service that uses some SIRI services as part of that. That's typically the actual travel leg. And then as part of the NeTEx fare model, you can also describe each of the transactions that the customer's done. So what journey did they buy, and all the parameters about how much it costs, where they pick the bike up, where they put it down, and so on. So if you're doing for example, a pay-as-you-go system in a city, again, you can get a uniform model of the user's usage for presenting to the user. So that's, as typically you'll need to justify the bill when you send that to them. So that's a basic example of bike sharing, and I think you can see those same concepts would be equally useful for building up something like a taxi service, where you're interested in the parking points, so where you can pick up a taxi, how much it costs, what you need to do in terms of booking information, and then if we move on to another example, which is the carpooling. If you look in the next slide.
Do you see the right slide?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's visible. And so for ride sharing, again, typically the ride sharing is going to have an online engine where the offers where people can offer journeys, and those journeys can be accepted, and you want to be able to integrate those legs into a itinerary that might include other services. So in a similar way, we want to make sure that information about the service can be made available, it can be published. So does a ride sharing service exist in the area at all? How do you find that service? How do you find a ride on the service? Where are the meeting points? So often there are now sort of organized carpooling areas where you can meet and leave your car and meet up. So those can all be covered as just like as a kind of a different type of stop, if you like. Then you'd be using the actual engine to find an offer and accept one. Then you probably want to get to the meeting points, and then you actually make a ride. So in terms of what NeTEx and SIRI actually do or don't do, we're not actually covering the dynamic API that offers and receives the journey is not covered by any SIRI service. That's typically going to be undertaken by the particular services that are out there offering ride sharing. But what this is about is making the possibility of using a ride sharing service visible to journey planners, so that you can draw traffic to them and offer it as a viable alternative. So if we just look at the next slide, I can give you a sort of little visualization of roughly what's going on. So you've got typically going to have the parking points and the fact that a ride sharing service covers a particular area. And you can have your user details and your preferences all described in a NeTEx format, but the actual offering of the possible journeys is typically going to be covered by an engine, but you can describe describe the charges and the fares that have been charged for it if you want to provide a uniform itinerary that has the price of each leg using the components. And yeah, so those are sort of two simple examples, very much on the just trying to show that what this is about is being able to get joined up travel and make alternative modes integratable and share the bits of data that's appropriate to share, and leave the dynamic bits that the individual specific APIs and services need to do themselves. So we get a joined up ecology. Thanks. So Christophe, did you want to cover a few more of the concepts in a bit more detail?
I think we are kind of running out of time. So most concepts have been present. Anastasia, just let me know if you want me to go through the concept.
Yeah, actually, we have 4 minutes. I would say if there are any questions, we can now reply to some questions, couple of questions. And we have also added some links here for potential supportive material. The presentation, but also the recording, will be available on the website. You had also the link shared by Pascal on the chat. Well, if there are no questions, we can. There is one question I see. So how would we go about implementing these new capabilities? So this is something like a recommendation that we need to give, I guess.
Yeah. That's. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go on.
So go ahead, Christophe.
So NeTEx is really an exchange protocol. So the first thing you need is to have this information in your system to be able to exchange them. So as said by the legislation, you are not obliged to create the information. What the legislation, European legislation, is expecting that the information you have will be provided if it's available. No need to create new ones. This said, as an exchange protocol, you will probably use the XSD. So the XSD is referred here in the link. So it's a deep link directly to the part 5, but you can have, if you go higher, you will have the access to the old NeTEx XSD. So the XSD gives you a schema, an implementation schema for XML. And from that point, you have tools that will convert your XSD to languages like Python, like C#, like C, like Java. And from this, you will need to connect this generated code to your database to be able to exchange a format and generate the XML files. So that's for the provider, and the consumer will be just the way around. Same thing, creating the C, the code, the C code, Java code, Python code from the XSD, and be able to read the information. Yeah, the main thing to ease the exchange, you may need what we call a profile, which is this is the description of a subset of NeTEx. We did profile at European level for passenger information, for accessibility, and we will most probably also have a profile for alternative modes. The profile will just help you to jump in, but you don't need the profile to start an exchange.
Actually, you had already replied to the other question about the profiles. Nick, do you want to add on this question?
Yes, I mean, summarizing that is basically, if you're already a provider of say a bike sharing or a taxi service or something like that, what you need to do is to publish the information about your service in the NeTEx format, and then it's available in a common format for journey planners and to pick it up. If you provide a journey planner, then you should be aiming to be able to import the data about the alternative modes into your journey planner. And if you're an authority trying to sort of coordinate and bang heads together and make stuff happen in your city, then you should be recommending, if you use this uniform standard, then we'll have a common format for all the different bike sharing services in the city, all the different taxi services. So it should simplify stuff and allow us to use common tools.
We have a couple of questions more. One, probably to reply quickly because we are running out of time, is what version of SIRI do we need to use? I guess
the latest one.
there is no.
Yeah, just use the latest version of SIRI, which is available on the website on the GitHub, the master of GitHub. Also some question about interoperability. One thing important I forgot to mention is, and you can see it in that slide, is that we did work on a mapping with GBFS. So whenever you have GBFS information, NeTEx Part 5 give you the exact way to go from GBFS to NeTEx and vice versa. Of course, you have more information in NeTEx, possibly in NeTEx and in GBFS, but everything which is in GBFS will fit in NeTEx for the schedule information and SIRI for the real time. And about TAP TSI, NeTEx, there was quite a lot of work to make sure that everything which is in TAP TSI is available in NeTEx. I'm not sure there are a lot of things about alternative mode in TAP TSI, but anyway, the work has been done to make sure that NeTEx and Transmodal are consistent with TAP TSI.
Another last question. Sorry.
Maybe just an addition that here are the links to the NeTEx website. There is also the Transmodal website where you can download the data model, which also incorporates all the features. I mean, the real-time features and also the dynamic part and the static part.
One more question I would like to address before we close. It's about the harmonization with DATAx 2, because you refer to DATAx 2. There are some, let's say, common parts, but are they really common or?
Well, I mean, if you take things like parking points and so on, the point is you do want to be able to join up DATAx data with other mode data. So that means that you need to have knowledge of where the parking elements are in both models. So NeTEx goes some way to describing parking capabilities, but typically if you're building a system, you're going to be wanting to link up and to have a uniform way of saying, well, these are the parking points. And if you compare, say, the pricing information and the real-time information, there are it should be interoperable. So you could either take NeTEx data and make it available to a parking system, or take parking data and make it from DATAx and make it available to NeTEx.
Yeah, and actually I can add this work is also part of NAVCore. So for the parking in particular, the idea is to also bring harmonization through NAVCore project and DATAx 2 and Transmodal. Okay, we are running out of time. There are also some other questions, but unfortunately we cannot address. Probably we can reply to you later. Thank you very much for joining, and see you next time, most likely in 2 weeks. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye. Thank you.